So, wanted to introduce you and turn it over to Tamir Novotny, who is, as I said, a member of the EPIP New York City Chapter Steering Committee, and he's also on staff at Living Cities. And I'll let him tell you a little bit more about himself and about Living Cities. And he will also introduce Nadia Owusu, who works at Living Cities as well, and June Holley, who is the principal at Network Weaver Consultants. So with that, Tamir, I'm going to turn it over to you. Tamir, are you there?
I am.
All right, let's get going.
Can you hear me?
Yep, there you are.
Oh, great. I was muted a second ago, not sure. So sorry about that. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join us today to talk about open sourcing social change. My name is Tamir Novotny. I'm a Senior Associate for Public Sector Innovation at Living Cities and a member, as Kate said, of the EPIP New York City Steering Committee. I'm really excited to be a part of this series. The idea for this webinar actually came out of just a casual conversation that I had with a couple of steering committee members, and it's been great to be working with national and the leadership in my chapter to make it happen. It's really a nice example of what you can do when you have a network like EPIP behind you. So let me say just a couple of things up top about why we're doing this and what we're hoping to accomplish. And then we're going to turn to June and Nadia. So on the next slide, we'll just frame up the focus of the conversation. I'm sorry, one more, please. Thank you. So we're doing this webinar because the social and economic challenges that we face today are wickedly complex problems which require networked solutions. For Nadia and me, as part of our work with Living Cities, which is itself a network of sorts, a consortium of 22 of the world's largest foundations and financial institutions dedicating to improving cities and the lives of their low-income residents, this means three things. One, everyone's a part of the problem. So policies, practices, and institutions collectively interact in complex ways that perpetuate economic disparities and limit access to opportunity. So whether you're, a supposedly evil corporation or somebody who's really fighting the good fight, by our definition, if you're part of the system, you're part of the problem, and by extension, part of the solution. So in order to change results, we have to change the system that those policies, practices, and institutions collectively represent. And the more people and organizations are a part of that effort, the easier that is to do, and the more sit on the sidelines, the harder it is to do. And finally, the way that organizations traditionally work in the social change world, meaning focused inwardly, sort of keeping things close to the chest, is not conducive to this kind of open source approach. We have to go from an organization-centered approach to an open source approach, which is really focused on engaging networks in real time to promote self-organizing within those networks, encourage experimentation, and move towards a deeper collective understanding of what it takes to achieve real social change for our society as a whole. Next slide, please. So these, these three ideas lead us to three important questions. One, what does it actually mean to open source social change? So we're really fortunate to have two leading practitioners with us today. June has spent decades developing a body of work around this topic, including running her own network, teaching others how to do it, and writing some really great stuff on the subject, particularly the Network Weaver's Handbook. June is going to help us break down the concept of open sourcing social change, both in theory and concretely. Second, how are social change organizations actually working to do this? So theory is one thing, but actually hearing about how it works on the ground is a different story. So June's slides touch on a couple of examples of this, and then we're going to use the work of Living Cities, which in my case inspired the idea for this webinar, to explore how it's played out in our specific context. Nadia is a Senior Associate for Knowledge and Organizational Development at Living Cities and one of the architects of our own open sourcing social change strategy, and she's going to walk us through that. And also, by the way, if you haven't read Nadia's work on Living Cities blog, The Catalyst, take a look, because you'll start to see right away what makes an open source approach so powerful. In Living Cities, that work is really distributed across the organization, and Nadia has written some very powerful pieces, both sort of directly aligned with Living Cities work and on some of her own work that she's leading on. And finally, how can practitioners advance open source approaches to social justice work, both within their organizations and outside? So June and Nadia are both going to provide perspectives on this. June as a practitioner and an advisor, and Nadia as an emerging practitioner and a leader within Living Cities and in philanthropy more broadly. So before I turn it to June, just a couple of notes. We're going to do what we can to get everyone involved here. So one, as Kate said, really encourage you to use either the chat box or Twitter to send in your questions and comments. Feel free to engage each other. You know, the technology makes it only so possible for us to interact directly with one another through the webinar platform. But Twitter lets us get around that a little bit. So please use that to your heart's content. Do make sure to use the hashtag open source change, which lets us hear what you guys are saying. Second, in a couple of places, we're going to put up a polling question or a discussion question. If we get enough responses, perhaps we can pull them into a follow-up document. We don't want to just sort of let that all die here. But let us know, because it helps us understand where you all are with regard to this topic. And if you're feeling really spry, we've got a nice, lightweight follow-up exercise at the end of the session. So with that, I'll turn it over to June for an introduction to network weaving. June?
June, make sure you're not muted because we can't hear you right now. Okay, we're having some technical difficulties with hearing June, so just give us a second here.
Can you hear me now?
There you are. Yes. Wonderful.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Thank you.
Great. Oh, great. I am not certain what's wrong. Okay, great. Well, thank you for inviting me here, Tamir. I'm delighted to be here today with people who are interested in what I think is a really important topic. Next slide. So, okay, so first we're going to try to define open sourcing social change. But even before we get into the definition, next slide, I'd like to just have us all think about, you know, what's the problem here? And if we look at all these people who have been working for many, many years on trying to create a world that's better for everyone, we've made surprisingly little progress. And the network researchers are starting to explain why. And part of the reason is that we're like these folks on this slide. We tend to hang around with people like ourselves, and that makes our vision really quite narrow. And we're missing out all these different perspectives on how, you know, what this change, the changes and the systems we're trying to change are all about. So next slide. So, thanks. So I've been working with a group in Hawaii that's been convening Native Hawaiians who are telling them, hey, stop talking about low income when you're talking about poverty, because for us, poverty is much more about networks. It's much more about isolation. And when people have really vibrant, diverse networks, that's when they usually thrive. And when they're cut off from others, that's what leads to poverty. And so just imagine if we all really took that definition of poverty seriously, how it might change our activities. So, you know, talking to different folks helps open these new perspectives. So next slide. So that's why it's really important when we're talking about open sourcing social change that we understand that it's about creating the kinds of networks where we're able to access provocative, different perspectives, and then where we collectively create an environment of thousands of collaborative experiments that we're all able to watch and learn from. That's when we're going to make the kinds of breakthroughs and see them rippling throughout the world and bringing the kind of transformation we're interested in. So next. So how do we do this? Well, first step is that we have to take off our organizational glasses and put on network lenses. And so we start looking at different kinds of things. Next. So what will we see when we put on our network lenses? Well, I'm a social scientist by training. And for us, when we use that word networks, we're not talking about Facebook, we're not talking about Twitter, we're talking about sets of relationships and the patterns that they create. And that idea of patterns of people. And so in this map, you know, each of these dots represents a person and the lines are showing their connections. And those connections are really important because they influence the kind of communication that's going to be going on, whether it's one way or two way, and how likely it is that collaboration and innovation are going to occur. Next. And so what we see is that a lot of organizations are like on the left. You know, you might have a nice little network within your organization, but you really don't have that great of connections with other organizations. And so when you have an innovation, in many cases, it never reaches other organizations that are working in the field. The network on the right is what we call a hub and spoke. And so you can imagine many foundations, for example, you know, have all these wonderful organizations that they are funding, but they don't necessarily really work on connecting those organizations so that they're deeply engaged with each other in working on similar kinds of problems. Next. The other thing that is really important is for people to see, even if they have if they're part of a formal network where they have membership, that they need to remember that there's this huge set of relationships outside of that network that can bring in resources and bring in new ideas. And so, you know, the danger of formalizing networks is that sometimes they become like organizations and have a lot of the problems that organizations do in bringing in new ideas. So next slide. So a colleague of mine, Valdis Krebs, and I looked at hundreds and hundreds of both successful and unsuccessful networks and looked for those who were most helpful in promoting innovation and collaboration. And they tended to look like this, and we started calling it a smart network. And so in a smart network, you have this core of clusters of different kinds of people and organizations and perspectives. But these folks have gotten to know at least some of the other people in the core, and they've been working together and have built up some trust. But the other part of networks that we often really forget about is that we need to have these peripheries around the outside that are drawing in new ideas and new resources. And what we found is that in a really great network, that might be 3 to 5 times the number of nodes that are actually in the core. And that is sort of the potential for action. Next. We've also found that a lot more and more networks are actually trying to map the system that they want to transform and beginning to identify places we call leverage points, that are places where if they work now, if they focus their efforts there, they're much more likely to create transformation. They're kind of like cracks in the concrete of the old system. Next. So what we see then is that these smart networks are taking these leverage points and they're organizing dozens and dozens of experiments and collaborations around those leverage points where people, instead of really trying to reach traditional outcomes immediately, their main purpose is to try to learn more about the system they're trying to change. And to do that, they have to, what's really interesting is that most people are in maybe a dozen different little experiments at any one time. And so when a breakthrough happens in this, it ripples throughout the whole network through those other collaborations they're part of. And so, you know, if they take some of these breakthroughs and new ideas to some of these other collaborations, change and breakthroughs can really make a difference in the system. Next. And we call this self-organizing. So, you know, the question is, do we, you know, lots of people, when they think of a network, they think they need to convene everyone around a table and try to get them to plan and agree together. But what the research is showing is that that often isn't the way to open up to experiments. And next slide. What we really want is to have it look more like this, where, you know, there's lots of people in different parts of the network independently are trying new collaborations, and it's kind of, they're exploding up into the sky and lighting up things for everybody, because they're doing it in a really open and transparent way. So we can, even if they fail, we're learning about it, and that's helping us understand this system we're trying to change. Next. So here's how it works. One piece that's often missing in networks that I see are these things called Twosies. And to me, they're the building blocks of healthy networks, where just two people get together and they maybe get on the internet and see what people around the world are doing about this particular aspect of the problem. And then they come back and they talk with others. And you can see all the stars here for, they're reflecting on what they've learned, and then being able to form small projects where they build skills and collaboration, because working with people from a lot of different organizations is really different than teamwork within an organization. You have to get new kinds of accountability and new ways to communicate. And so as people build these skills, then they're able to do these really larger, more high-risk projects that are really going to, really start changing the system. Next. And what you end up with is, initially you have small projects, but as it gets going, more and more people begin to get this idea of initiating action, and that they don't have to wait for a plan or a meeting, that they can just try something out. And what we've seen in a lot of communities is there's a tipping point where self-organization and innovation just take off and start accelerating. And that's where we really see, a lot of change. And that's what we've seen is there's a really lot to learn. For example, if you look at the local food systems, local food networks that have been built, it's been just the last 15 years. Now almost every community has that kind of a network, and in almost every case they've never met around one table. People have just started taking initiative and trying out things. And yet those networks have moved from, good tasting local food for yuppies, or, people who are well off, to dealing with huge issues of access to healthy food and food in the schools and obesity prevention, and much large. So they've expanded their scope as well as the number of people involved. Okay, so they've developed, just when you think of all the things that local food projects, they've done CSAs, they've done local brands, festivals, kitchen incubators, farmers markets, community gardens, farm to school programs. I mean, you could just go on and on about all the different experiments. And those experiments, because there is a national network, even though it's very informal, has spread those kinds of ideas. Okay, so next, let's go on to the next part, which is really about, okay, what's it take to get to this kind of a network? And it's a lot about a new kind of leadership. We call it network weavers, but you can call it network leadership. And it's really different than the traditional kind of sort of heroic leadership that we've been used to. So in network leadership, you're really helping others become leaders. You're helping them initiate action. You're catalyzing rather than doing things yourself. And you're supporting this bottom-up self-organizing. Next. And so what you do then as a network leader is work on these 4 different aspects of networks. The relationship network, which we've talked quite a bit about, the action network, how do you get people to self-organize, the intentional network, how do you help people all focus on some particular problem or system, and the really important one that we're just learning more about is the support network. How do you support all of this? So next slide. So one thing that I've seen in these networks is that some of you may be familiar with this Gibbs triangle, which I've changed a little bit, which is more about how important trust building is. But for me, it's this attention to relationships, which includes trust building and communication and widely distributed network leadership. If those 2 are in place, you don't need nearly as much rules or structures, control, or even goals to make things happen. And so we're just learning about what those mean next. So the first thing is that these network weavers need to start connecting. They go out and they're looking at the silos all around and starting to go out to different organizations and listening deeply. Next slide. Then what they do is not only listen deeply for them to be the hub, but thinking all the time, who could I connect this person with that they wouldn't normally interact with that might create a new source of energy? Next. So what it looks like is that you're introducing 2 people to each other and hoping that some sparks are going to fly and that they're going to become the catalyst for more innovation and more action. Next. Just another couple slides here and we'll get a chance. So your role is this network guardian role is something that we all need to learn a lot more about how to be like this big hunk of ginger. And the amazing thing about ginger is it's a rhizome, and so if you pulled off any little chunk from that ginger and you put it in the soil, it would create another huge hunk. And so what our role is to really support and coach and reflect, catalyze, helping everyone in our networks to become like a little bud in this that is capable of both creating many other leaders and many other actions that can then really start to make a difference in our communities. So just in closing, next slide. In the Network Weaver Handbook that Tamir mentioned, it's much more information, details about all these different networks and the different roles. But, just from what you've heard, starting to think about, what kind of network weaver are you? What are you doing to help more innovation happen and more sharing of innovation happen, open sourcing of innovation happen in your network? So that's it.
Great. Thanks, Juden. Before we transition to Nadia, a couple of things. One, I'm hoping you can give just a little bit more on these network weaver roles that we have here on this slide. This is one of the things in reading through the Network Weaver guide that I found most helpful in just understanding how I work in networks.
Okay, sure. So the connector or catalyst is the person who is going out and listening to people, listening deeply, identifying people's interests and passions, and then connecting them to others who in some way may complement them. They may have some interest in common, but their difference can be a benefit to both in helping them get some new perspective or to make the beginnings, the seed of the second one on the bottom, which is a self-organized projects. And so, as we start thinking of these self-organized projects, what I found, this is probably the biggest missing piece, is that there's not enough people out there that know how to actually keep a project going and without doing it all themselves, but just to support a small project group with people from different organizations or different types of individuals working on something together. So there's a whole skill set there. And how do we have the platforms? How do we make sure everybody knows what's going on? How do we help people remember what their tasks are when they've got a million other things going on in their work life? Then the network facilitator, these are folks who are really thinking about the network as a whole and tend to do that convening role when it's needed. So maybe they're bringing people together to understand the system, or if the network is wanting to become more intentional and formalized, they really help people work through the many decisions that you need to make to have that kind of a shift. And then the network guardian is more like somebody flying in a hot air balloon over the whole network and noticing things and thinking about the systems that need to be in place, what kind of communications, how do we help people learn how to use the web, how do the network weavers get supported and trained, how do we have the kind of deep reflection that we need? How can we make sure everybody's learning what's going on throughout the whole network? So these four roles, if you have all of these roles, and we have a network weaver checklist I think we're going to share with others, where you can do a self-assessment and you can pass that out to your network and then begin to identify, wow, well, we have a lot of connectors, but we don't have any network guardians. So what are we going to do about that? How can people learn more about what it means to be a network guardian? So is that it, Tamir? Does that help?
Yeah, that's perfect, and thank you so much. It's an incredibly helpful overview, and for those on the phone who haven't read the Network Weaver's Handbook yet, June is really just scratching the surface of the incredibly deep and sweeping work that she's done on this subject, so I strongly encourage you to check it out. Before we switch to Nadia, Kate, if we could pull up the first poll, I thought this would be a good chance to get folks thinking about what kind of network weaver they are. And so we would pull up a poll just asking you to let us know. I'll just give you a moment to do that before we move on to the next presentation.
Of course,
And
it's
Tamir,
important
so
for people. I
go
just
ahead,
want to
sorry.
point out that people may be normally playing more than one of these roles, and we're just asking you to select, say, the one that you do most.
Kate, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say this is a great way to, in terms of beginning to think about networks, to see where some of the EPIP network is at. So please, yeah, chime in and cast your vote, and in just a minute we'll show you all the results of those.
So Kate, let me know when we're ready to move on to Nadia.
Yep. Hopefully y'all are seeing the results now. So it looks like pretty well matched between connector catalyst, self-organized project coordinator, and network facilitator. So thanks for chiming in, guys. Okay. All right, switch over to Nadia.
Yeah. So now we're going to turn to Nadia Owusu, who's a Senior Associate for Knowledge and Organizational Development at Living Cities and one of the architects of our open sourcing social change strategy. And she's going to walk us through how Living Cities has begun to approach the open sourcing of social change and some of the leadership opportunities that that's created for emerging practitioners in philanthropy. Nadia? Yeah, I think Nadia's still muted.
Hear me? Okay, hi everyone. I'm really excited to join you today. I'm going to talk a little bit about how Living Cities is approaching what June was describing earlier. If we want to go to the first slide, please. So as you can see, Living Cities is a collaborative of 22 foundations and financial institutions, as Tamir noted earlier. So collective impact and collaboration is really core to what we do here. And so I'm going to be speaking a little bit to our experience of implementing an open sourcing social change strategy, and also speaking a little bit from my own experience as an emerging practitioner myself. I've had the opportunity to exercise a lot of both formal and informal leadership in this area, so I'm just going to speak a little bit about that experience too. So at Living Cities, we believe that no one Superman leader or institution can solve our most wicked problems on their own, and that is the hypothesis on which we were founded. So we really think about a problem-solving network as how we're going to be able to get to real impact. And through that network of our members, grantees, and partners, we work to understand how leaders can achieve and sustain unprecedented alignment. And today, with all of the advances in technology, we can really expand that network far beyond the institutions and leaders with which we work in deep ways. As Stu noted, it's important to understand the practitioners and leaders that are on the periphery of your network as you generally think about it. So we really are thinking about building a network effect, both in places and across places, to accelerate the co-creation, adoption, and adaptation of innovation among practitioners trying to see change happen in places. And specifically, the goal of our open source knowledge strategy is to extend the impact of everything that we are learning through our portfolio of grants, investments, programs, and research, and also to really learn and engage with the work of other high-performing leaders and institutions to expand what we call the adjacent possible, because you can't build on innovation if you're not aware of it. So we work to open source social change towards opening that up by modeling and creating opportunities to learn about successes and failures and to advance the best and most current thinking available in real time. And in doing this, we've realized that this can't be an add-on to your work. It really has to fundamentally be how you do your work. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about how Living Cities has put this approach into practice. So we can go to the next slide. So this next slide is just sort of an illustration of some of the things that we're doing around open sourcing social change and the change and influence that we've seen through these activities. Through our investments, such as our signature integration initiative that supports cross-sector decision-making tables in cities on issues from workforce to health to education to equitable development. The Strive network, for example, is a network of cities that are really working to re-engineer education from cradle to career. And Living Cities supports these types of efforts, what we call civic infrastructure across the country. And through this kind of work, we're bringing together places regularly to learn from each other. We also bring this lens to all of our in-person interactions. Our team are really actively seeking out knowledge sharing opportunities, whether that's conferences or one-on-ones with others, because we also believe that a lot can come from a two-person collaboration as well. And in addition to supporting this type of networked approach in person and on the ground with our grantees, our dynamic open source knowledge strategy also shares these lessons from that work and those networks with the broader field. And this is just another way that we're experimenting with short-circuiting the innovation curve, which is illustrated sort of in the diagram that shows the Twitter followers and the newsletter. And that diagram kind of shows the impact that one blog post can have that's far beyond the reach that we could have imagined. we understand and realize that there has long been a bias in philanthropy and social change circles that the only knowledge worth reporting comes after you've completed your work, and then you share a best practice or success story as a finished product in a white paper, for example. And we still believe that that's important, but you can also share all the way along what we call the knowledge continuum. So that goes everywhere from an aha moment, if you're at a conference and you're like, oh my God, that was so smart, and this could really, I really need to think about this and how it could impact my work, to sharing moments when you're really struggling with a problem, because we also think it's really important to share challenges as well as successes. And when we committed to doing this, we realized that we could get really smart about the tools that we use. For example, if you have that sudden aha moment of insight, you could shoot out a quick tweet to kind of see what other people think and see if like other people share that excitement around that idea. And then deeper learning can be shared through like a webinar like this one with a more targeted audience, or you can share with a broader audience through an op-ed on a popular platform, and that's something that we're also actively doing as well. We've published content on a variety of platforms from the Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and Basco, and we really think strategically about what the learning is that we want to share and who the key audiences are, and how we want them to engage with the information. We also kind of co-create knowledge content with our partners and make it standard practice to ask for feedback and ideas and insights from our networks on everything that we produce. So, for example, we have a blog that we update very regularly, and we also use the blog as a way to engage our network, asking them to contribute their own pieces in areas of mutual interest. And social media as well kind of has a huge potential to amplify the reach of all of our content. For example, a recent tweet about an article from our CEO on the Skull World Forum about impact investing had a reach of 867,000, which is far beyond what we could have dreamed about for a small organization before social media. Also, another interesting thing about this approach that we've discovered as we've continued to do it is that it really has created leadership opportunities within living cities for more junior staff. In fact, junior staff has really played a leadership role in implementing this strategy with our CEO's report. In early days of the strategy, the CEO was really excited about it and convinced that this was the future of problem solving, but it really meant that we had to make a lot of changes in terms of how our staff work, and specifically how we share with partners and with the field. So from an organizational development perspective, this was a really big pivot. And people really wanted to do the work, but this stuff was really new to a lot of our senior team. So for junior staff, many of us are of a younger generation, and we communicate this way anyway. We're really comfortable with real time. So there was this gap in experience at the top, which kind of opened up an opportunity to lead for the associate and senior associate level of our organization. And many on our team seized this opportunity to model the behavior and to support their supervisors in adapting to the change. And because this strategy is about open sourcing, it was also a chance to think about what does distributed leadership look like in an organization like ours. And we wanted to hear not just from the top, but from across the organization when we start putting out content, because in many cases, junior staff are really key to implementing the work, and so their insights matter too. So seeing junior staff kind of take the reins on this knowledge work, writing, the social media, contributing to the blog, doing a lot of the editing, pushing the senior team to work in this way, has really helped us to have an internal conversation about permeability, and ensuring that there are, that everyone who works here understands the whole of what we do and not just their piece. So it really helps junior staff to understand that you can lead from wherever you are in an organization. And this has been really empowering for a lot of people. It's also meant that we've had to take a dose of our own medicine, because we are really asking our partners and grantees on the ground to work in these more networked ways. And now we're kind of struggling with that challenge as well. But we're really committed to it and have begun to experiment with cross-cutting teams that include staff at all levels and from all departments, which means that strategy conversations that kind of used to happen only at the top now kind of include a diversity of voices. So I guess we can go to the last slide to kind of conclude. So we really think in terms of the overall approach for practitioners who are really seeking to implement this in your organizations, I think the best pitch for it is that it really expands the adjacent possible and allows ideas to kind of collide. So it's really important to understand that your institution is part of a problem-solving network, and that's really how we like to talk about this work. And it's not just a one-way push out of information. It's really about starting conversations, both in person and virtually, and sharing, learning, and advancing the best thinking possible. And it really requires everyone to think differently about problem solving. So we talk about collective impacts for systems change in our work. And this is a really great kind of concept to use as you're trying to convince people to start to take some of this work on, because people are really talking about collective impact in our field, and it's really taking hold broadly. Everyone's talking about it, and we know that it holds great promise in terms of leadership opportunities as well for emerging practitioners. Many of us already use social media, as I said, and we can really use it to track and share conversations that you think your organization should be plugging into. So as you're using social media, you can kind of see what other people are saying about things that your organization cares about, and really kind of sell that to the broader staff, including senior members. And also using platforms like EPIP can be really helpful to find out what colleagues are doing in the field towards that as well. So if your organization is not already very active on the blogosphere, you can kind of think about what from your work you think can be lifted up that way. So, you know, write a blog as an example. We've had some success with staff brown bags on everything from Twitter to understanding audiences, and these have been led by junior staff as well. So that might be something to think about at other institutions. And there are so many ways to get started with this. And we have seen that, you know, many senior executives are really interested, but again, they don't quite get it yet. So we at Living Cities framed the change that we wanted to start to implement by thinking about mining, engaging, and letting go. So the work that we already have going on, let's mine that for the key insights and lessons that we can share with the broader field that will be helpful to our problem-solving network. Engage with them in conversation and kind of let go of the work and see what happens. And that can kind of be the most exciting at times. Although it can be hard for people, but again, this really is an area where emerging practitioners can kind of take the reins and help other people to adapt and show them the value of the approach. And I'm going to stop there and pass it back over to Tamir.
Thanks, Nadia. It's a really helpful illustration of how this work is playing out at Living Cities. So a question for both Nadia and June, and I'll start with you, June. June, your presentation highlighted a lot of examples of ways that people are building networks, not sort of almost agnostic on the channel. It could be through social media, it could be in person. And Nadia, your comments focused a lot on how to use sort of the web and Web 2.0 to build networks and connections that way. How do you guys think about the balance between building face-to-face networks and building virtual networks in the use of social media? And just a quick process note before I give it to you, June, to answer that. If you have questions for Nadia or June or comments, you can put them in the chat box on the upper right-hand corner of your screen, or you can tweet them with the hashtag #OpenSourceChange. June?
Well, I think that we need both. We need both very desperately. We need a lot more attention to both face-to-face and to virtual kinds of networks. You know, however, the potential of the virtual platforms that are coming online now is just tremendous. And so I think even if you have a locally focused kind of effort, I think it's really critical to help people learn how to use all the different platforms. And the thing is, you have to teach them how to learn to keep searching out, because the platforms are changing continually. And so it's usually you have to teach them how to patch stuff together. So, you know, for a while we were using Skype. Now we're using Google Hangouts because more people you can get more people on a call. you can use Google Docs, but then what happens when you need a little bit more collaborative project management? So, it's a continual, being in a continual process of exploration of new and better kinds of platforms. For example, these webinar platforms, many of them are very created for like this one, in fact, are for very hierarchical situations where there's, presenters and then there's an audience, and more platforms are being developed that are much more networked and allow much more peer interaction, but we're still not quite where we need to be.
Yeah.
I agree completely with what June said. I think you really need both. And what we're trying to do when we think about how to engage with people in our problem-solving network is to start from what we're trying to achieve from the engagement and who the audience is. And then that kind of helps us to figure out how best to engage. Like sometimes if you haven't really interacted with someone, then the best thing to do is pick up the phone and say, hey, I saw what you're doing in this area and it looks really great and I think these are the connections, and you can start there. Or if you're wanting to kind of tap into a conversation that's already happening, social media can be great for that because you can kind of connect with a lot of people at once. For something that's more of a deep engagement, like you're trying to co-create a solution, bringing a group of people together can be good. So I think it really depends on what your objectives are for engagement. And I think you can use, and we should be using, the whole spectrum of the tools that are available.
And if I can just add one thing, I mean, take a look at conferences. I mean, they're just ripe for being reframed as networking events. And so some things are starting to shift there where there's more time for networking. There's actually network building activities, moving from open space to a variant of that helps people organize, not just to talk, but to actually move to action. And those can all happen at a face-to-face event like a conference that then leads to, a virtual work groups.
So now we want to get a specific question out to you all, and Kate, this is 2 slides down, if you don't mind, please. So in Living Cities, we were fortunate enough that our CEO was really deeply committed to this work, to the point that we had junior staff, like Nadia said, really leading the transition to this way of working. Different organizations have different settings. What do you see as the biggest barriers to open sourcing social change in your work? For example, June talked about control and hierarchy. Those can be barriers. Perhaps people don't have skills that they need. June talked about many of those in her comments, and Nadia added some. So either tweet that to open source change with the hashtag, or shoot them in the comments, questions chat box on the upper right of your screen. And while we're doing that, pardon the noise, we have construction going on upstairs. Nadia, on that point, Ben's commitment here at Living Cities was critical, but in a lot of organizations, the CEO is levels away, and sometimes engaging that far above your level is just off limits. How can folks on the line operating in that kind of environment think about how to move an agenda like this in those circumstances?
Right. I mean, I definitely think having the CEO really committed to this work and a huge believer in it from the beginning was really helpful, but we still got a lot of kind of resistance from the senior team who weren't used to working in this way. So based on what we've learned from that, just continue to reiterate, look for early wins. Social media is an easy way to show early wins because you can kind of see how your work has a broader reach through this kind of a strategy. Starting small can be good. Find champions within the senior team who believe in this way of working, and you have to kind of demonstrate value. So those are the key things that I would say would be helpful for organizations when you're running into resistance in trying to do this work.
Mm-hmm. And June, you advise. Go ahead.
You don't have to have everyone getting on board at the same time. I mean, we're learning more and more about sort of innovation diffusion, and you start with people that are open and trying to think about, could you set up, we call them sandboxes, a sandbox once a week where people get together at lunch to just play around and try out new kinds of platforms out there, and some new ways of working, and then encourage them to take them back, try them out, and then come back again. So it's almost these mini peer learning, peer assists kinds of things. And then actually really encourage, when they do try something out, to make it very transparent and open, and find ways to share with the rest of the staff what they're doing, and how much fun it was, and how it helped them in their work. So just finding where the energy is and helping it move along can make a real big difference. And then other people will see and say, oh, okay, now I get it. I want to learn too.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We continue to celebrate success, to kind of celebrate people's wins in this area. And we also host a lot of brown bags, and sort of small groups of people come together to experiment with different ways of doing this work. So I think that's so important.
Great. So Kate, sounds like we're getting some questions coming in from the group.
Yeah, thanks, Tamir. So we have a question from Laura Horowitz, asking, can either of you talk us through an example of this work in the peace movement? And actually what I'm going to do, June and Nadia, is go through all of these, and you can speak to what most calls your attention, since we're getting close to time here. So that's the first one. And then Laura also has a question: what would you say to people who say you are describing how people already work? What are the practical implications to being able to describe the work in this way?
Also, there was a question earlier from Diana Church, who wanted to know how we intentionally create or build networks.
And then one more question from Laura. Nadia and June, can you give more about demonstrating value? Can you give concrete examples where you have done so?
In 2 minutes? We need guidance. What should we do? Perhaps there's a place, maybe there's a Google Doc where we could put those questions and answer, spend a little bit more time answering them, because none of them are super easy questions. They're all great questions, but I'm not sure we could, and maybe others want to speak to any of them, but I feel like those are all pretty complex questions to answer quickly.
Yeah, June, good idea. We can definitely put together a Google Doc and share that with, put the questions on there and share that with everyone who's on the call. And if you and Nadia are willing to pose answers there, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Hey, Kate, seeing that we're coming up on time, do we have time to do our last poll before we break?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Great. So while Kate's pulling that up, the question from our end is, what, if anything, should EPIP consider to support you as you think about open sourcing your own social change work?
So there's an opportunity to help EPIP guide our work in trying to be more of a network weaving organization. So if you guys can chime in here, we'd love to hear what you think about how we can help push this work forward amongst our own organization and amongst our network. I'll give you a few more seconds here to chime in with your vote. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Votes are still coming in. All right.
That's great. And this June, I just want to add that a lot of people selected number 2, and I think that's what we're finding out, that practicing this work with support from peers is just the best way to learn this, learn and try some of this out.
Great. Thank you, June. So before we wrap up, before I turn it over to Kate to wrap up, if we could go to the last slide, we thought it might be helpful, since the best way to learn this is by doing it, to propose a very light exercise that you guys might want to try after you get off the webinar. And if you're interested, tweet at us or shoot something in the question chat box, and we'll follow up with you in a week or two and see if you did it. And if not, why not? Can we get that last slide up, Kate, or are we out of time?
Is this, oh, sorry. There you go. I just forgot to hide the results. There, you should see it now.
Thanks. So the question is, what's one thing you could do following the webinar to try to advance an open source approach to social change? And some things that we thought of just to get your thinking going is, one, to propose a blog for EPIP National. As you all, I'm sure, heard from Kate many times, we're always looking for content from our fellow members to post to the site and feature your leadership and your thinking. Close a triangle, to use the term that June used. So connect two people who you know who could do something innovative together but who don't know each other now. Or use Twitter to reach out to somebody who maybe you've never talked to before. I've done that personally and reached authors of best-selling books. Cory Booker, though I guess he's not that hard to reach. So just a couple of thoughts. And let us know what you think, either a hashtag open source change or in the questions chat box. And with that, I want to thank you all for your time. I'm going to turn it over to Kate to close us out.
Great. Thanks so much, Tamir. And thanks so much to June and Nadia as well. This is a topic that we're very interested in at EPIP, since we are developing a network of social change agents. And we hope that our members will be connected throughout their careers and throughout their lives, since we're all trying to envision a bigger and better world. So thank you, Tamir, for designing this fabulous webinar, and Nadia and June for participating as our presenters. Thanks to all of you for joining us as attendees. And as Tamir said, we are an organization that is fascinated and inspired by leadership and action. So if you all want to get involved with either designing a webinar or posting a blog post, please reach out to me, kate@epip.org, or to Emily as well. Emily, we will send her contact info around in that Google Doc. And we look forward to connecting with you all in the future. So please stay engaged and be a part of our network if you're not already. Thanks to everyone for joining, and we look forward to seeing you down the road. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Look out for follow-up materials as well. We'll be sending those around. Take care, everyone.